You think disconnecting from social media means missing out on opportunities? Maslow's hierarchy reveals something shocking. The people scrolling endlessly are actually stuck in psychological survival mode, while those who ignore these platforms are ascending to a level of human development that only 2% of the population ever reaches. The irony? Everyone believes they're connecting, but they're actually trapped. Not every person with thousands of followers has achieved self-actualization. There's a profound difference between digital validation and genuine psychological fulfillment. What looks like social success is often desperation stuck at the third level of Maslow's pyramid. People chasing likes, comments, and shares aren't building authentic connections. They're feeding an insatiable hunger for belonging that never gets satisfied. The scroll never ends because the need never gets met. This isn't about rejecting technology. It's about understanding where you're investing your psychological energy and why 99% of people are playing a game they can't win. In this video, you'll discover exactly how social media keeps you trapped in the lower levels of Maslow's hierarchy, and why ignoring these platforms gives you access to psychological needs that drive true human fulfillment. I'll reveal 5 specific mechanisms that humanistic psychology identified decades before smartphones existed, showing you precisely how to reclaim your cognitive sovereignty and join the 2% who reach self-actualization. This isn't another digital detox challenge or productivity hack. This is humanistic psychology applied to modern addiction patterns. This video is for people who sense that something fundamental is wrong with how we're living, even if they can't articulate what. If you've ever felt emptier after hours of scrolling or noticed your best ideas come during disconnection, you already understand intuitively what Maslow proves scientifically. But warning, this only works if you're willing to confront uncomfortable truths about what you're actually seeking when you open those apps. There's a specific moment that happens to everyone, though most people don't recognize it when it occurs. You're lying in bed, phone glowing in the darkness, thumb moving in that automatic upward motion. Scroll, scroll, scroll. Your eyes are tired. Your body is telling you to sleep. But something keeps you there, suspended in a strange hypnotic state, watching strangers live their lives while yours passes by in the background. And then, for just a fraction of a second, you become aware of yourself. You see yourself from outside, and there's this flash of confusion, almost embarrassment. What am I doing? Why can't I stop? Then the feeling passes. You scroll again. The moment is gone. Abraham Maslow spent decades studying human motivation, trying to understand what drives behavior at the deepest psychological level. He wasn't interested in surface explanations. He wanted to know why humans do what they do, what needs push us forward, what fulfillment actually means beyond material success or social status. His research led him to a framework that's become one of the most recognized models in psychology, the hierarchy of needs. But here's what most people miss about this pyramid. It's not just a nice diagram about human motivation. It's a diagnostic tool that reveals exactly where you're stuck psychologically and why certain behaviors feel impossible to change. At the bottom, you have physiological needs: breathing, food, water, sleep, basic survival. One level up, safety needs: security, health, property, employment. Then something interesting happens. The third level is where most of modern society lives: belongingness and love needs. The desperate hunger to be accepted, to fit in, to be part of a tribe, to be seen, to matter. This is where social media plants its hooks. Not in your rational brain, not in your conscious decision-making, but in this ancient, primal part of your psychology that fears rejection more than almost anything else. Because for most of human history, being cast out from the group meant death. Your nervous system still carries that programming. Every notification triggers it. Every like soothes it temporarily. Every absence of validation threatens it. You're not weak for feeling this. You're human. But understanding this is a first step to freedom. Above belongingness comes esteem needs: respect, self-esteem, status, recognition, strength, freedom. This is where people think social media's success lives. But notice something crucial. This is still not the top. Still not self-actualization. Still not the full expression of human potential. And here's the devastating truth that Maslow discovered. You cannot skip levels. You cannot jump from seeking digital validation to achieving your highest potential. The pyramid doesn't work that way. Social media companies know this. Their entire business model is built on keeping you trapped between levels 3 and 4, oscillating between needing connection and needing status. Never satisfied, never complete, always reaching for the next hit of validation that will finally make you feel whole. Except it never does. It never will. Because you're trying to satisfy a 4th level need with a 3rd level drug. And Maslow proved that self-actualization, the 5th level, the place where creativity flows naturally, where you become who you're truly meant to be, where you experience genuine fulfillment, requires something that social media systematically destroys: sustained attention, deep solitude, and freedom from external validation. The people who ignore social media aren't missing out. They're not disconnected or behind. They've made a choice, conscious or not, to stop feeding the lower levels of the pyramid and start building toward the top. They recognize that every minute spent in that digital space is a minute stolen from their highest potential. And in a world where 99% of people are trapped in the scroll, unable to look away, this creates an asymmetric advantage so profound that it's almost unfair. Let me show you exactly how this trap operates, because once you see the mechanism, you can't unsee it. Maslow's 3rd level, belongingness, is where social media sets its first snare. Every platform is designed around a simple psychological premise. Humans are tribal creatures who need social connection to survive. This isn't manipulation. This is biological reality. For thousands of years, your ancestors lived in groups of roughly 150 people. You knew everyone. Everyone knew you. Your reputation mattered because it was tied to your survival. Being gossiped about, excluded, or rejected could mean starvation or death. Your brain evolved to be exquisitely sensitive to social cues, to hierarchy, to inclusion and exclusion. These platforms hijack that ancient circuitry. But here's the critical difference that most people miss. Traditional human connection required presence, time, and genuine relationship. You couldn't fake belonging. You had to show up, contribute, be vulnerable, build trust over months and years. Social media offers a shortcut, a simulation. You can feel connected without actually connecting. You can broadcast without listening. You can collect followers without knowing anyone. And your brain, desperate for that 3rd level need to be met, accepts the counterfeit. For a while. But Maslow observed something fascinating in his research. Needs that aren't genuinely satisfied don't go away. They intensify. They become compulsive. You experience this. The more you scroll, the more you need to scroll. The more you post, the more you need validation on those posts. The more followers you gain, the more inadequate any number feels. This isn't a character flaw. This is predictable psychology. You're trying to fill a real need with something that creates the sensation of fulfillment without delivering actual fulfillment. It's like drinking salt water when you're thirsty. It feels like you're addressing the need. You're going through the motion, but you're actually making the problem worse. Now watch what happens at the 4th level. Esteem needs. This is where status enters. Social media promises you can build respect, recognition, and influence. Look at the influencers. Look at the thought leaders. Look at the people with millions of followers who've turned attention into currency. This looks like esteem, doesn't it? This looks like the 4th level of the pyramid. But Maslow made a crucial distinction that nobody talks about. He separated esteem into 2 types. Esteem based on external validation from others, and esteem based on genuine competence and self-respect. The first type is fragile, dependent, and endless. The second type is stable, internal, and actually leads somewhere. Social media can only ever give you the first type. And here's the trap within the trap. Pursuing external validation actively prevents you from developing genuine competence. Because genuine competence requires sustained focus, deep practice, confronting your limitations, and long periods of work without feedback or recognition. It requires what psychologists call tolerance for ambiguity, the ability to not know if you're on the right track, to trust the process, to delay gratification. Every time you check your phone for likes, every time you refresh to see who commented, every time you adjust your message to please the algorithm, you're training yourself to be dependent on external feedback. You're systematically destroying your ability to do the deep work that builds real skill and genuine self-respect. And without that genuine competence, you can never reach the fifth level. Self-actualization isn't something you achieve by accident. It's not a participation trophy. Maslow studied people he considered self-actualized: Abraham Lincoln, Thomas Jefferson, Albert Einstein, Eleanor Roosevelt, Jane Addams, and found consistent patterns. These individuals shared certain characteristics. They were reality-centered rather than ego-centered. They were problem-focused rather than self-focused. They had profound interpersonal relationships with a few people rather than superficial relationships with many. They were spontaneous, creative, and autonomous. They regularly experienced what Maslow called peak experiences, moments of profound clarity, connection, and understanding. Notice what's absent from that list. They weren't checking their phones every 5 minutes. They weren't crafting their image for public consumption. They weren't outsourcing their self-worth to the opinions of strangers. They weren't fragmenting their attention across dozens of platforms. And here's the foreshadowing you need to understand. There's a specific psychological capacity that separates people who reach self-actualization from those who remain trapped below. Maslow identified it clearly. Every person who ignores social media is unconsciously cultivating this capacity, and it's about to become the most valuable skill in human history. Maslow wasn't working in isolation when he developed his hierarchy. He was building on insights that stretch back thousands of years across multiple wisdom traditions, all pointing to the same fundamental truth about human consciousness. The Buddhist concept of monkey mind describes the restless, unsettled quality of attention that jumps from thought to thought, never resting, never satisfied. Buddhist monks have spent millennia developing practices specifically to train this capacity for sustained, undistracted awareness. They understood something profound. Your ability to direct and sustain attention is not just a cognitive skill. It's the foundation of human freedom. Without it, you're a puppet dancing to whatever stimulus appears in your environment. The Stoic philosophers of ancient Rome and Greece recognized this same principle. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, wrote extensively about the importance of maintaining sovereignty over your own mind. He understood that external events, including the opinions of others, have no inherent power over you unless you grant them that power through your attention. Epictetus taught that the only thing truly within your control is where you place your focus and how you respond internally. Everything else is external and ultimately irrelevant to your inner state. These weren't abstract philosophical musings. These were practical psychological technologies for maintaining psychological autonomy in a chaotic world. Now here's the insider knowledge that most people don't understand about Maslow's work. He didn't just study self-actualized individuals to create his pyramid. He studied what he called peak experiences, those rare moments of extraordinary clarity, connection, and meaning that transcend ordinary consciousness. And he found something remarkable. Peak experiences almost never occur when attention is fragmented, when you're distracted, when you're performing for others, or when you're consuming media. They occur in moments of deep absorption, presence, and solitude. They occur when hiking alone in nature, when creating art with complete focus, when solving a complex problem that demands every ounce of mental energy, when experiencing genuine intimacy without performance, when confronting mortality or profound beauty. The common thread? Complete presence without divided attention. Maslow documented this pattern across hundreds of cases. The capacity for peak experiences, which he considered essential to self-actualization, requires what neuroscientists now call sustained attention networks. These neural pathways strengthen with use and atrophy with neglect. Every time you fragment your attention by switching between apps, every notification that pulls you away from deep focus, every compulsive check your phone, you're weakening these networks. You're literally reshaping your brain to be incapable of the psychological states that lead to self-actualization. Cal Newport, a computer science professor who studies productivity and focus, has documented what he calls attention residue. When you switch tasks, particularly to check social media, part of your attention remains stuck on the previous activity. Your cognitive capacity is reduced. Your depth of thinking is compromised. You feel like you're multitasking effectively, but brain imaging studies show you're actually performing worse at everything you attempt. The kicker? It takes approximately 23 minutes to fully recover your attentional capacity after a distraction. Think about that. If you check your phone every 15 minutes, which is below average for most users, you never actually achieve full cognitive capacity. You spend your entire day in a state of partially divided attention, never accessing the psychological depth required for genuine insight, creativity, or peak experience. Ancient contemplative traditions knew this intuitively. Modern neuroscience has confirmed it empirically, and Maslow mapped it onto his hierarchy of needs. The people who ignore social media aren't just avoiding distraction. They're protecting the neural infrastructure required for self-actualization. They're cultivating what psychologist Mihai Csikszentmihalyi called flow states, periods of complete absorption where time disappears, self-consciousness vanishes, and performance reaches peak levels. Csikszentmihalyi studied flow for decades and found that people who regularly experience flow states report significantly higher life satisfaction, meaning, and fulfillment than those who don't. And flow is impossible with a phone in your pocket, sending you notifications. Here's what the research shows very clearly. The psychological benefits of sustained attention compound over time, while the costs of fragmented attention accumulate invisibly until they become catastrophic. You don't notice you're losing capacity for deep thought until you try to read a book and realize you can't focus for more than 2 pages. You don't notice you're losing the capacity for genuine connection until you're sitting across from someone important and your hand reaches for your phone without conscious thought. You don't notice you're losing your autonomy until you realize you can't go an hour without checking your feed, and the panic that arises feels like genuine need rather than learned dependency. There's a phenomenon that Maslow observed but never fully explained, and it's become dramatically more visible in the age of social media. He noticed that people trapped in lower levels of the hierarchy become increasingly resistant to information about higher levels. They literally cannot perceive what they're missing. It's not denial. It's a form of psychological blindness that results from unmet needs dominating consciousness. When you're hungry, everything becomes about food. You can't think about art or philosophy or self-actualization. Your entire perceptual system narrows to focus on satisfying that hunger. The same thing happens with belongingness needs. When you're desperate for social acceptance, starving for validation, anxious about your status within the tribe, your entire world collapses down to managing those concerns. You can't see beyond them. And here's where it gets truly insidious. Social media doesn't just fail to satisfy these needs. It actively amplifies them while creating the illusion of satisfaction. You post something. You get likes. For a brief moment, the anxiety eases. You feel seen. You feel validated. But the effect is temporary. Within minutes or hours, the anxiety returns, often stronger than before, because you've trained your brain that validation comes from external sources, and those sources are unpredictable and outside your control. This creates what behavioral psychologists call a variable ratio reinforcement schedule, the same mechanism that makes slot machines addictive. Sometimes you get the reward. Sometimes you don't. You never know which time will pay off. So you keep pulling the lever, keep posting, keep checking, keep scrolling. The uncertainty actually makes a behavior more compulsive, not less. But there's a deeper pattern here that connects directly to Maslow's hierarchy, and most people never see it because they're trapped inside the system. The individuals who stepped away from social media consistently report the same initial experience, a period of profound anxiety. FOMO, fear of missing out, fear of being forgotten, fear of becoming irrelevant. This anxiety is not imaginary. It's your nervous system recognizing that you've removed yourself from what it perceives as the tribe. For the first few days or weeks, this anxiety can be intense. Some people crack and return to the platforms. But here's what happens if you push through. The anxiety peaks, then begins to fade. And as it fades, something extraordinary occurs. You notice space opening up in your mind. Literal cognitive space. Thoughts that aren't reactive or comparative. Curiosity about ideas that have nothing to do with your social status. Interest in projects that might take months or years with no external validation along the way. This is a transition from the 3rd level to the 4th level of Maslow's pyramid. From seeking belongingness to developing genuine esteem. but requires tolerating the discomfort of unmet belonging needs long enough for your psychology to reorganize around different priorities. And here's the secret that no one tells you. You cannot think your way into this transition. You cannot logic yourself into caring less about social validation while you're actively feeding the system that makes you crave it. The only path is behavioral. You have to remove the stimulus. Stop checking. Stop posting. Stop consuming. And tolerate the discomfort of withdrawal, because that's what it is. Withdrawal from a legitimately addictive behavioral pattern that hijacks ancient survival circuitry. But something else happens during this period that Maslow would have recognized immediately. You start having different types of thoughts. Instead of what will people think of this, you start thinking, what do I actually think about this? Instead of how can I position this for maximum engagement? You start thinking, what am I genuinely curious about? Instead of crafting an image, you start discovering an identity. And this is where the asymmetric advantage begins to compound. While 99% of people are optimizing for metrics that don't actually matter, follower counts, engagement rates, viral moments, you're developing something far more valuable, an internal compass. The capacity to direct your own attention based on your own values rather than algorithmic incentives. Maslow called it autonomy and identified it as a core characteristic of self-actualized individuals. They weren't reactive. They weren't performing. They were genuinely expressing their nature without constant reference to external approval. But here's where incomplete information becomes strategic. There are 5 specific neural adaptations that occur when you remove social media from your daily routine. These aren't opinion. These are measurable changes in brain structure and function that neuroscientists have documented. The first 3 changes happen within weeks. The 4th takes months. And the 5th is where everything transforms. But understanding this requires going deeper into how attention shapes consciousness itself, and why the people who control their attention control their destiny. Remember that moment lying in bed, scrolling in the dark, that flash of awareness where you see yourself from outside? That moment contains the seed of something Maslow considered absolutely essential to self-actualization. Self-awareness without judgment, the ability to observe your own behavior patterns without immediately defending them or rationalizing them, just seeing them clearly. Maslow found that self-actualized individuals had an unusual capacity for honest self-assessment. They could acknowledge their flaws, limitations, and mistakes without their ego collapsing. They didn't need to maintain a carefully curated image because they weren't deriving their self-worth from external perception. Their esteem was rooted in genuine competence and self-acceptance. Compare that to the psychological state required to maintain a social media presence. You're constantly curating, editing, filtering, selecting which parts of your reality to broadcast. You're managing impressions. You're suppressing the parts of yourself that don't fit the brand. You're performing a version of yourself that you hope will be accepted, liked, validated. This isn't inherently bad. We all engage in some level of social performance. But when it becomes your primary mode of existence, when you're never not performing, when you've forgotten which parts are authentic and which parts are character, you've severed yourself from the foundation of self-actualization. Here's the psychological benefit that people who ignore social media discover, often without realizing what's happening. They regain access to their authentic preferences. They start noticing what they actually enjoy rather than what they think they should enjoy. What actually interests them rather than what generates engagement. What actually matters to them rather than what appears to matter based on social signals. This sounds simple, but it's revolutionary. Most people have completely lost touch with their genuine preferences because they've outsourced that to summon to social feedback. They don't know if they actually like something until they see how others respond to it. They don't know if an experience was meaningful until they've posted about it and received validation. Their internal compass has been replaced by external metrics. Maslow documented this pattern in people stuck at lower levels of the hierarchy. They were what he called other-directed rather than inner-directed. Their behavior was determined by social pressure, conformity, and the need for approval rather than authentic values and genuine interests. And he was clear, you cannot self-actualize while remaining other-directed. It's psychologically impossible. Self-actualization requires developing your unique potential, expressing your authentic nature, pursuing your genuine interests. You can't do any of that while constantly checking whether others approve. Now here's the callback to that story from the beginning, that moment of awareness in the dark. The reason that moment feels so uncomfortable, so embarrassing, is because you're briefly seeing the gap between who you actually are and what you're actually doing. You're seeing the puppet strings. You're seeing the addiction. You're seeing the performance. And your authentic self, the part of you that Maslow believed was trying to emerge and self-actualize, is horrified by the waste. Not morally horrified, existentially horrified. Because every hour you spend scrolling is an hour you're not spending developing your unique capacities. Every moment of fragmented attention is a moment you're not experiencing full presence. Every performance of the algorithm is a moment you're not expressing your authentic nature. The people who ignore social media aren't superhuman. They're not necessarily more disciplined or more enlightened. Many of them simply felt that horror intensely enough that they couldn't continue. They reached a threshold where the cost became undeniable. And once they stepped away, they discovered something that validated Maslow's entire framework. The higher levels of the pyramid aren't just theoretically superior. They're experientially richer, more satisfying, more meaningful, more real. The fourth level, genuine esteem based on competence and self-respect, feels fundamentally different from the third level of seeking validation. It's stable instead of volatile, fulfilling instead of draining, generative instead of extractive. And the fifth level, self-actualization, where you're regularly experiencing peak moments, expressing your unique nature, pursuing genuine growth, is so qualitatively different from the social media experience that they barely seem like the same species of human activity. One is watching life through a screen, curated and filtered, and compressed into dopamine hits. The other is living life directly, fully, presently, with all the depth and texture and meaning that humans are capable of experiencing. Maslow spent his career trying to articulate this difference, to make people understand what they were missing by staying trapped in lower levels of the hierarchy. And his conclusion was always the same. You can't convince someone to climb higher by describing the view from the top. They have to take the first steps themselves. Feel the difference in their own experience. Discover that what they thought they needed actually pales in comparison to what becomes available when they stop settling for substitutes. Here's what you need to understand as we close this loop. The advantage that people who ignore social media have over 99% of the population isn't about productivity or focus or time management, though those are secondary benefits. The real advantage is psychological evolution. They're operating from a different level of Maslow's hierarchy. They've moved beyond the desperate scramble for belonging and status that keeps most people trapped. They've accessed the upper levels where genuine fulfillment, creativity, and meaning become possible. And in a world where almost everyone is stuck below, operating from these higher levels creates opportunities that are invisible to those still trapped in the scroll. While others are optimizing for engagement, you're developing genuine expertise. While others are crafting their image, you're building actual competence. While others are consuming curated highlights, you're living fully in 3 dimensions. While others are seeking validation, you're creating value. The gap compounds daily. Every hour they spend in the feed is an hour you spend in flow. Every distraction they succumb to is a period of sustained focus you maintain. Every performance they deliver to the algorithm is an authentic experience you have with reality. Over months and years, this created a divergence so profound that you're essentially playing a different game. But here's the mystery that remains, and this is where most people get stuck. Knowing this intellectually doesn't change behavior. You can understand every word of this video and still find yourself scrolling tonight. Because understanding isn't transformation. Information isn't integration. Knowledge isn't wisdom. The actual transition from knowing to doing, from understanding to embodying, from seeing the trap to escaping it. That requires something that can't be packaged into a video or reduced to steps. It requires what Maslow called courage to be, the willingness to tolerate the anxiety of stepping outside social validation systems and trusting that something more real waits on the other side. Some of you watching this are ready for that step. You felt it in that moment of awareness in the dark. You recognize yourself in the description of performing rather than being. You've already started to see the bars of the cage. For you, this video is confirmation of something you already know. permission to trust what you're feeling. Evidence that you're not crazy for wanting something different than what everyone else is chasing. But here's what I can't tell you. What specifically happens when you actually step away? What reorganizes in your psychology? What becomes possible when you stop feeding the lower levels and start building toward the top? That has to be discovered directly, experienced personally. It can't be spoiled or summarized because it's not information, it's transformation. And transformation only happens in the actual living of it. What I can tell you is this. Maslow spent 50 years studying human potential. He examined thousands of case studies. He built a comprehensive framework for understanding motivation, needs, and fulfillment. And his conclusion was unambiguous. The highest levels of human existence, the places where life becomes most meaningful, most creative, most fully alive, are available to everyone. But they require stepping away from the seductive substitutes that promise fulfillment while delivering only craving. The 2% who reach self-actualization aren't special. They're not gifted with superior genetics or fortunate circumstances. They simply stopped settling for simulations of satisfaction and started pursuing the genuine article. They stopped performing and started being. They stopped seeking and started becoming. The question isn't whether you can join them. The question is whether you're willing to tolerate the discomfort of transition, whether you trust that something real exists beyond the feed, whether you have the courage to find out who you actually are when you're not constantly defining yourself through social metrics. I can't answer that for you. Nobody can. But I can tell you that on the other side of that question, for those who actually explore it, lies a way of being that makes everything you currently think matters seem like the puppet show it actually is. If you found value in this perspective, there's more to explore about the psychology of attention, the neuroscience of transformation, and the practical path toward the upper levels of human development. But for now, sit with the question. Notice whether you can feel the gap between your current patterns and your potential. And trust that awareness, that uncomfortable, embarrassing, clarifying awareness, might be the beginning of something far more significant than another scroll for the feed could ever provide.